In this episode of Mississippi Roads, we get an out-of-this-world interview with Biloxi native and Apollo 13 astronaut Fred Haise. We peer into the world of cosmic artist Edwin Faughn, and we gaze at the stars with the Jackson Astronomical Association.
Down Mississippi Road. Mississippi Road.
Hi, welcome to Mississippi Roads. I'm Walt Grayson, and we're hosting the show this week from the Infinity Science Center in Hancock County. It acts as the visitor center for the Stennis Space Center, which is just right across Interstate 10 from us, just a few miles. One of the members of the board of directors here is Biloxi native and astronaut Fred Haise. Fred was on the Apollo 13 mission. You know, that's the one that never made it to the moon, and you'll find out a little bit more about that in a minute, because we sat down and talked with Fred not too long ago about his life and about his career in space.
Flight Dynamics Officer says the trajectory looks good. We show 1/2 mile in altitude at this time. 13 Houston, go at 30 seconds. Roll complete and we're pitching.
I got interested in high school, working on the school newspaper, continued through 2 years at Perkinston Junior College, and was sports editor 1 year, editor the next year of the paper, and planned to continue on in school to get a degree in journalism. And what turned me 90 degrees was the Korean War. I wanted to serve my country, and the military service that best fit my having 2 years of college and the age I was at was the Naval Aviation Cadet Program. So I went in to flight training, and on graduation I was commissioned in the Marine Corps. I served in 2 Marine fighter squadrons, and that was my new career. I just loved flying from the very first time I flew, and said somehow my career now is not journalism, it was going to be something to do with aviation. I was with NASA 7 years as a test pilot, and from there applied for the first time and was accepted into the astronaut program in 1966. The most unusual things about flying in space from my aircraft experience was zero gravity on a continuum, to be able to float around your body or objects, kind of euphoric. Made this little spacecraft we were in seem a little bigger. The other thing was the views out the window from the height you were at, either in Earth orbit, looking at the Earth as a round globe, and of course as we headed out to the moon, to see it grow smaller and become very small out about the moon, and then of course the moon itself, which is quite a stark contrast from the Earth. It's a very lacking color, shades of grays, dark to light, whereas the Earth is a very beautiful object with color, oceans, cloud patterns, land masses, with a halo around it, which is kind of our atmosphere. You could see a circle in the Earth, not very thick, but around the Earth. So the views were what was probably most spectacular about being in space. Trained for 2 previous flights, Apollo 8 and Apollo 11. So I was, the backup crew on Apollo 8 was Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and myself. And then it put me in line really to fly 14. We normally cycle 3 missions. So if you take 11 and add 3, it would have been 14. Al Shepard and Stu Rusa had come into the crew and had never been through a training cycle. Ed Mitchell was the only one that had had a previous backup assignment. So they decided to give them more training time, and they moved us a mission ahead. So rather than us fly 14, we ended up getting assigned to fly 13.
MCC, record us to flight speed.
Ignition, flight.
Roger. Roger. Clock start.
April 13, 1970. The mood could only be described as relaxed. Apollo 13, man's 5th lunar mission. the third scheduled to land on the moon.
Okay, we'll go at once, Capcom. Booster, how do you look?
We look good, Fly. We'll go.
Okay, fired up. We're going.
They pulled Aquarius away from the Saturn third stage, the S-4B.
Okay, I can see the S-4B now at the hatch window.
Odyssey and Aquarius moved away from Earth toward the moon.
We were on a passage toward the moon. We'd done a TV show and we're fixing to go to bed for our sleep cycle. The next morning when we woke up, we were going to go into lunar orbit and start preparing the LEM and get our spacesuits on and get prepared to go descend and land and do our EVAs on the lunar surface the next day. And the explosion happened when Jack was asked to stir the cryos, which is run a little egg beater.
13, we've got one more item for you when you get a chance. We'd like it to stir up your cryo tanks.
Okay, stand by. Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Yes, sir. Houston, we've had a problem. We've had a main B bus undervolt.
Roger, main B undervolt. Okay, stand by at 13. We're looking at it.
And we had a pretty large bang associated with the caution and warning there.
An electric short occurred, which caused the explosion of tank 2, of the 2 oxygen tanks, which for me was just a horrible sick feeling in my stomach of disappointment, because I knew that alone ended the mission, basically. We were going to have to come home and no landing after all that training. From there, we were troubleshooting for quite a while. Jim Lovell and I were in the vehicle for 50 minutes, then trying different things that people were trying to figure out to stop the leak, which then started, very slow leak, in the second tank, the only remaining oxygen tank.
And there's one whole side of that spacecraft missing.
Is that right?
The whole panel is blown out, almost from the base to the engine.
Really a mess.
Man, that's unbelievable.
After that time, 50 minutes, we knew they'd run out of ideas, they had, and we went to power up the landing craft, which we would have used for landing, but now it was going to serve as our home for the next few days to try to get back, because we obviously knew the command module would have to be shut down. So we went to power up, Jim Lovell and I, to power up the lunar module to get it to use for communication, for life support. And as it ended up, for several engine firings to redirect our path and correct it on the way back for entry. We were not on a path to get back home at the time this all happened. So the first maneuver was critical. Using the computers, we still, in a LEM, using the computers for an automatic burn that put us on a path now to circle the moon at the right altitude and swing around to be roughly in the right direction back to Earth. So the only remaining question was how the mothership, the command module, would work when we tried to turn it back on, because it was never designed to be turned off in flight, never tested to be turned off. And of course, we got very cold in the vehicles, having to go to low power. And of course, it was colder because it had nothing on. So we violated all the specifications on all the certainly electronics equipment in that vehicle. And one of those miracles, when it came back to life, it gave us the second most accurate splashdown of the program.
Report from the Iwo Jima that Apollo 13 at a distance of 4 miles from the ship.
Odyssey, Houston, we show you on the mains. It really looks great.
Unfortunately, I went into training within a month after 13. And in November of that year, they canceled 18 and 19 for budget cuts. And so I lost the chance. I knew then I'd lost the chance to go back. And then later I was assigned as the commander of Crew 1 to fly the Space Shuttle Enterprise. This was the very first orbiter we built, and I got to command 5 of the 8 test flights we did on Enterprise. in 1977.
From the start, the exploration of space has been hazardous adventure. The voyage of Apollo 13 dramatized its risks. The men of Apollo 13, by their poise and skill under the most intense kind of pressure, epitomized the character that accepts danger and surmounts it. Theirs is the spirit that built America.
That was my profession, that was my life, and if I could qualify and still be able to do it, I was going to do it.
The Infinity Science Center in Hancock County is not the only place in Mississippi you can experience the stars. Up in Choctaw County, just off the Natchez Trace French Camp, is the Rainwater Observatory and Planetarium. And the director there, Edwin Faughn, has been watching the sky since he was a child. And what he's seen through his telescope lens inspired him to become an artist. And he paints with scientific accuracy.
I've been fascinated with astronomy and art ever since I was a little boy. As a little kid, my parents said I had my head in the clouds most of the time looking at the stars. I think it was in the 9th grade or 10th grade, the television series Cosmos came out with Carl Sagan. And I was just blown away by it, as most millions of people were as well. And there were astronomical illustrators on the series. And I was 15 or 16 years old. I'd never seen anything like that. All I'd ever seen is Star Wars or Star Trek, things like that, which I love. But I'd never really seen real scientific art. It was about that time I met an astronomer in my hometown up in Paragould, Arkansas. I gradually started doing artwork then and was getting published not just locally, but into some national and international publications. My work right now is on NASA's main Kepler site. If you Google my name or something, you'll be able to find some of those things. But the paintings that I do primarily are in a field and area of research called exoplanets, extrasolar planetary systems. We've got, the 8 planets plus Pluto and probably 100,000 Kuiper Belt objects out there in our solar system, but they're finding planetary systems orbiting other stars outside of our solar system. And that's basically what a lot of my artwork is depictions of what would these worlds look like. And it's a very rare field, extremely rare. There's a lot of artists that do space themes or things like that, or fantasy type things and science fiction, but not hard science. The artwork, it's scientifically accurate. It requires extensive research because of unimaginable distance or gravity or temperature extremes. You can't get on the edges of a supernova or something like that and survive, or a black hole or things like that. So through the paintings, you can actually travel and see basically what's actually there. This particular painting here was done for the cover of Scientific American magazine, a special edition called The Once and Future Cosmos. It's a painting of a supernova where a star has exploded. A painting of a black hole. Black holes occur basically when supergiant stars collapse. Imagine if you could take the Earth and compress it to where it would fit in a stadium or something like that, a super dense object. There's an accretion disk going around that particular object there, and an event horizon there at the core, and there's huge jets of radiation blasting along a twisted magnetic field, which you can see in the piece there. This is a huge ringed gas giant planet, very similar to Saturn, but much larger. You're standing on the surface of this particular planet, or on the surface of one of its moons there, looking back at the planet, and you'll notice this particular moon here has a thin haze on the horizon. It's being created by these erupting geysers that you're seeing on the surface there. They're finding planets now in what they call the habitable zone around these other stars. They call it the Goldilocks zone. It's not too cold, not too hot. It's basically where we're at. And there's a possibility that some type of life could exist on something like that. This painting here is of a ringed gas giant, except you're on the equator of this particular moon. From the equator, that ring system would look like a vertical shaft in the sky. I came here and I had reached a point in my career that I was ready for a change and doing something different. I've been coming to Rainwater for over 20 years. I started coming here back in the late 80s and early 90s, and I used to do programming here. I did exhibitions here for the conferences with my artwork. Rainwater Observatory and Planetarium is actually one of the largest observatories in the southeastern United States. We have some of the largest telescopes in the state, some of the largest in the southeast here. I'm the only staff employee here for the observatory. I've got quite a job here to do. I do everything from marketing to advertising, doing the work that we do here, doing the programming, development of programming, grant writing, a little bit of everything. We work here with researchers. I'm coordinating all that. We have a sizable operation out here as far as the volume of equipment and telescopes and things. We have a number of astrophotographers that come here from around this country that like to do imaging here for this area, and they utilize our equipment. Sometimes they use their own. This particular image here was done by Bill Kennedy. He is a brilliant astrophotographer and has taken all these images, some of these images here. This one particular one here is the Orion Nebula. It's a cloud of mostly hydrogen gas, different types of gases that are in there, others as well. But it's a stellar nursery. They believe this is where new stars are forming. It's really remarkable what we're getting, these images we're getting in here. A lot of our visitors come out here, and for the first time when they see the Milky Way, a lot of the kids, they look up and go, what in the world is that? A lot of people have never seen it. Astronomy to me is important because we go about our daily lives. We go to and from our jobs, to and from work. We have no idea. We're traveling at 66,000 miles an hour around that sun. That's incredible. And we're one star, one of 200 billion others that's cruising around a galaxy, the Milky Way. And our Milky Way in turn is cruising with billions of other galaxies through the universe. And like I said, regardless whether you're an atheist or agnostic, Christian, or whatever, that's humbling to me to think about the immensity of the universe and how tiny we are in the middle of something far greater than anything we can comprehend.
This is what it takes to get to the moon. This is the booster stage of what would have been Apollo 19 had they not stopped the moon program right after Apollo 18 and switched over to the shuttle program. You know, we've been influenced by space travel our entire lives. In our next story, we meet a group of folks who started a lifelong hobby back when they were youngsters in the infancy of the space race. They've kept it up to this day. The Jackson Astronomical Association tells us why they've kept looking up. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. So says Psalm 19, verse 1 in the Old Testament. And that reference gives testament to the fact that people have been looking up at the sky, particularly the night sky, for many millennia. The sun blocks out pretty much everything else but itself in the daytime. At nighttime, the heavens is a never-ending source of amazement. I imagine storytelling came about when early people sat outside around their fires at night, looking up and seeing the dots of light above them. Connecting the dots made people and animals out of the shapes, and then made up stories about them. Heroic stories of great deeds, deeds so daring that upon successful completion of them, they were given a place in the stars as a reward, as an eternal reminder to other mortals that a way to immortality exists. Heroism above and beyond the expectation of the gods, and your image too will light up the night sky. But some of the night lights change with the seasons but stay fixed in relation to each other, while others dance all over the sky, the planets. They were given their own set of mythology to explain why they do what they do. Then along came people who took a much closer look at the sky, Galileo, Copernicus, and others who had more down-to-earth theories of why the heavens acted the way they acted. Lo and behold, debunked the myths. But not only did that not lessen our fascination with the stars and planets, it only strengthened them to a new point of view, astronomy. And when it finally became practical, anybody who wanted one could get their own telescope so they could see the night sky for themselves. And eventually all of that looking at the stars and planets and the moon gave mankind the desire to not only see them, but to become one with them and touch them and go to them. That's where a lot of the members of the Jackson Astronomical Association came in back in the 1950s and 1960s with the infancy of the space race and space exploration. Most of these guys are like me. They remember Sputnik being put into orbit by the Russians.
Started out as a preteen and interested in the space program in the late 60s, watched the moon walk first time in 69, and then of course continued with my parents buying me a telescope in my mid-teens and have been into it ever since then.
I was 8 years old and my mom bought me a 3-inch Sears Discovery telescope for Christmas, and went out and looked at the moon, and then, you know, later, a few nights later, found Saturn, and ever since then I was just like a fish with a hook in the jaw. I was hooked.
In our time, we, mankind, have made the leap off Earth and into space. Now, none of us, you and I, are likely to go there ourselves, but there's still that fascination to look at the stars and the moon and to look closer and closer. And the closer we can see with our biggest telescopes, the more there is to see. Now, here's what we saw one winter night at the Jackson Astronomical Association's little patch of dark sky out near Raymond in Haise County. Of course, nighttime sky watching demands a good deal of afternoon setup.
Takes a little time, yeah. Well, I want to try to get it close to the North Pole.
Okay.
It helps later on. It's not critical, but it makes it easier to get the scope mount aligned later.
Yeah. And then, as night falls, the group settles into their telescopes. Some of them are far and away more complicated than those they first looked through.
I have it hooked up to a computer that I can actually control my camera on my computer when I put the camera in here. And of course the tracking software is on the computer as well. So this is a little more expensive than that, a lot more expensive, but it's a good way to get into astrophotography. I read and said if you're going to do astrophotography of deep space, you should have at least a 6-inch scope. I bought a 10.
But their fascination for the wonders of the night sky has not shed that early childlike awe.
I think Orion's going to be up tonight. We'll look at the Orion Nebula. Venus is up, probably even right now. You could even see it.
Yeah, I can.
There it is. And old favorite objects are extragalactic that are outside of our solar system and stuff. They're pretty well set. They'll be there. So if you know a star pattern or an area of the sky, it's just like reading a map, you know. Yeah. It's called star hopping. There was a time where, you know, life happens, marriage, kids, such have you, and you don't get the opportunities to go as much as you did. But a lot of times you're still sitting there saying, wow, such a beautiful night. I wish I could go stargazing. You know, I want to go stargazing. But it never has lost its interest to me. And most true stargazers that's been in it for any length of time, it doesn't, you know. I love looking at the beauty of the heavens and just seeing, you know, all the great masterpieces of objects that are up there. A lot of people don't really comprehend how vast space is. Nearest star is about 4 light years away, somewhat about 24 trillion miles. So traveling at 186,000 miles a second, you're still going to be 4 years getting there. And that's to the nearest star. There's hundreds of millions of stars in our galaxy, and then hundreds of millions of galaxies. So the universe is so vast and so great that it never loses its appeal. And no matter what size scope you have or what you do, you can never exhaust the opportunities of even a small telescope, you know. The opportunities of different objects and just seeing things, It just you can't exhaust the possibilities with the telescope.
The heavens declare the glory of God, even into our backyards right here in Mississippi. Well, that's about it for this show. If you'd like information about anything you've seen, contact us at mpbonline.org/Mississippi Roads, or like our Mississippi Public Broadcasting Facebook page. Till next time, I'm Walt Grayson, and I'll be seeing you on Mississippi Roads.
Mississippi Roads is made possible in part by the generous support of viewers like you. Thank you.